I am Inanawa from Opaskwayak Cree Nation on Treaty 5 territory, and I'm very humbled to be here with you guys. I see a lot of familiar faces and also a lot of new faces, and I look forward to being here with you guys in the next couple days and talk about this pressing issue of flood preparedness and, of course, climate change. So actually, before we review our agenda, in your package there are objectives, and Keely's going to go over them with you guys.
We had a water spill up here, so we don't want anybody to get shocked or to slip and fall. But good morning, everybody. My name is Keely Tenfingers, and I'm the forum coordinator, and I emailed back and forth with a lot of you, and I spoke with a lot of you on the phone, and I know I sounded a lot younger. Maybe I sounded a lot slimmer. Maybe I sounded a lot prettier. But I'm here, and I'm happy to be with you here today. So I wanted to quickly review the objectives of the forum. I think we're still sorting out some technical issues, and we hope to, with the monitors, and we hope to have these resolved in time for the presentation so that you're able to see any of the presentations in PowerPoint form. So what we're here today is to really follow up to the discussions and the feedback that happened at last year's Flood Preparedness Forum, and really focusing on providing the information that you said that you needed in order to be prepared at the community level, and also to provide you with tools and resources that your community can use before, during flooding, and of course in its aftermath. So this presentation that I'm reading from is actually in your folders. So if you wanted to take a look, it's there as well. So what did we hear from the participants in their feedback from last year's forum? Well, one of the major themes is that you wanted to have a discussion on climate change. And I think Chief Hudson said it very eloquently and succinctly when he said that climate change is here and it's happening and it's affecting us. So we are slated to hear presentations on climate change, and we'll be discussing it tomorrow in our sessions. Another major theme that we heard from the feedback last year is that Manitoba Hydro needs to be here. So they are. And we're very happy that Mr. Cormie is available to join in along with others on the water management panel that will be happening today. And we also heard that you wanted provincial and municipalities and ISK at the forum, so they are here as well. And I believe this may be the first time that the Association of Municipalities of Manitoba is here, so thank you for joining us. And so when we move to that discussion, I think all of the leadership provided comments that we need to go forward collaboratively. So when we get to the water management panel, that is exactly what we're going to be hearing the panelists speak about in terms of what is their role in water management and flooding issues, but also what are some ways from their perspectives that we can work collaboratively. So we also heard last year that these level of government should not only be invited here to present, but also we should be given the opportunity to ask them questions, to engage in constructive dialogue. So when we do have the water management panels, we have set aside some time for constructive dialogue to happen. But we also heard last year that we need to stick to the agenda. So I know we started out a little bit slow today, but I think we're gaining momentum and we're going to finish strong, especially in terms of sticking to the agenda. So when we get to the question and answer period, if I can kindly ask that we stick to the allotted time. So one of the last major themes that came out of last year's participant feedback was that we really want to discuss and highlight best practices that come from our own communities, that come from our own innovation. And certainly the leadership talked about that this morning, is that we are innovative people. We know what works in our communities. We're capable, we're competent. So tomorrow we're going to be spending a full day focusing on our own innovations and our own ideas that we want to bring forward as solutions to these many challenges. So with that, thanks again for your attendance and your participation, and I look forward to the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee, and I will be mindful as well to try and keep us on schedule and keep us with the agenda. So I'll just quickly run through the agenda. We're going to be having a presentation from Mary this morning about climate change, and then we will move on to a Prairie Climate Change Center where Lauren Cameron and Rosalie Labilloy will be here talking on behalf of that. And then we'll have a panel before lunch from Ruth Eden, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Water Management and Structures Division, as well as Cam Blight, the Vice President for Associations of Manitoba Municipalities. And then we'll open it up for a quick question and answer period. And then after lunch, we will be hearing from Glenn Howell, the Director of Community Supports, as well as David Cormie, the Director of Wholesale Power and Operations, Manitoba Hydro. And again, we will open up the floor for a question and answer period. And then we'll hear from Chief Tommy Monias from Pimavik and Michael Anderson, the former Director of Manitoba Kitinawi Ogamaganak Natural Resources Secretariat, as well as Byron Williams, the Director of Public Interest Law Center and Legal Aid, as well as a question and answer period for that. Moving on, we will be looking at a presentation for the 2019 flood outlook, and that will be brought to us by Fisaha, and who is the Director of Hydrologic Forecasting and Coordination Branch. Then we'll close the day hearing from Carson Robinson, who will, doesn't really specify. I'm sure he'll be going over that. And then tomorrow we will have small group discussions where we will talk about Lake Winnipeg channels, as well as hearing from a presentation from the Canadian Red Cross Personal Preparedness Education Toolkit. That will be brought to us by Kaylin Hodder, as well as Allison Everett. We'll have a quick break, and then we'll be hearing from Anna Zolicki from the Partners for Action, and then Diane McDonald, the Executive Director, as well as Renita Houle and Jan Dewar will be talking to us on behalf of West Region Treaty 2 and 4 Health Services Incorporated. Then we will be breaking for lunch. After lunch, we'll go into a roundtable sessions, sharing stories of evacuation and our resiliency. That will be facilitated by Keely Tenfingers. We'll have a quick break, and then we'll continue with small group discussions about sharing community actions and plenary facilitated discussions, facilitated also by Keely Tenfingers. And then we will close our forum with the prayers and songs. So we have a full agenda, a lot of things to get to, so I don't want to take up too much time. So I would like to call up Grandmother Elder to speak about climate change, Mary Metwe-Ashing. I'll learn that by the end of the 2 days. So please help me welcome Mary.
No, I'm good, thank you. Miigwech again. My English name is Mary Metwe-Ashing, and I introduced myself in my Anishinaabe name this morning, which was Sungagabawe Wasoganoikwe. And I hold that name very dear to my heart. When I got here this morning, I I didn't realize that I was supposed to speak and on climate change, but and I thought about, and I have half hour, and I thought to myself, what am I going to talk about? So, but before I go into my presentation, I want to acknowledge Grand Chief Arlen Dumas. I think he had just left. I also want to acknowledge Grand Chief Garrison Setti for your words, miigwech. Chief Cornell McLean. Chief Cornell McLean, him and I are from the same community. So thank you, Chief, for your words. I also want to acknowledge Chief Hudson as well for his words. As well, Carmen Cardos, I think I'm saying his name right, the regional director. So I want to acknowledge, and also to all the people that are here, who are the frontline people that work in the communities with respect to the topic that you are meeting about today. I want to acknowledge all of you, and good morning to all of you. When I was thinking about what am I going to share, for some reason I thought about my ancestors. I thought about my grandmother, and I spoke about her this morning. Then I also thought about my late father. He passed away, it'll be 4 years since he passed away. You know, whenever I go somewhere, I speak from the heart, because that's the way that my dad taught me. Is that he taught me, always speak from your heart and you will never go wrong. So with respect to my presentation, we're talking about water. In our community, we were one of the ones that were impacted. And I remember very clearly how it impacted our community with respect to when we flooded in 2011. But I want to go back because I'm very rooted within my culture. Ceremony is very important to my life, because that's what guides me in my daily life. It's the elders, our ancestors. That's what guides me in my life. And at the end of the day, when I wake up in the morning and I've completed my day, I reflect and I go home and I sit down on my chair and I sit in front of the window and I reflect on my day and ask myself, what could I have done better? Did I do this right? So I'm very aware, and I'm always very careful to ground myself at the end of the day so that I can have a restful night, so I could sleep well. And I have to say that I sleep well at night because I try and walk in a good way. But one of the things why I'm going back here, why I refer back, I want to back up. Prior to our flood, and I'm going to share why I'm sharing this with you. Prior to our flood in Lake Manitoba in 2011, I had a dream. And we have the gift of dreaming. We have the gift of dreaming because it's our ancestors. And I heard an elder a couple of weeks ago share with me, and he said, our ancestors are always with us. They look at us, they're watching us, and they're trying to tell us something. But we can't see them. But they come into our dreams, but we are not listening. So, in my dream, it was very clear. We have an outdoor building where we have a sweat lodge in that building. So in my dream, I was in that building, and I was coming out of that building. And when I came out, I saw water, and I saw rain that I've never ever seen come down the way that it did that day, that in my dream. And I was just watching it. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, my house is going to flood. And in my dream, what I had saw is that the land was covered with water. It was just covered. There was water everywhere. And then I thought to myself in my dream, oh my goodness, my house is going to flood. And then I walked over to my house, and I walked in. But what I had seen in my dream was my house never flooded, and it was protected. There was no water, but the water was surrounding my home. And when I walked in, the house was not flooded. And then I woke up. But the other thing that happened was, again, I was dreaming. And what I was dreaming about was I saw that I was always walking alongside water on a hill. And I couldn't figure out why I was always dreaming of a flood. Well, soon after those, the dreams came, we had a flood in our community. And exactly what I saw in my dream is what I saw physically. And our house flooded. And it was so, and I remember, and I was working in Lundar at the school at that time. And I would have to, we had people meeting us at the end of the reserve so that I left my car there, and then I would go to work in the morning. That's how we traveled. But I remember the land was flooded, and it was ripped up. It looked so depressing. I wanted to cry in the way that I saw of what the flood did to the land, the water. And but during that time, I left Lundar at that time, the school, and then I moved into another position. And then at that time, I worked with an agency, which was child welfare. During that time was when I moved, and then they flooded the northern communities. There was one particular story that always remains, that I always remember, of what was shared and what I had heard when we were sitting in meetings during that flood, of when the people were moved from their communities and they were brought into Winnipeg, and wherever there was hotels available for the flood victims. But there's one story that really moved me, and it was about this family. And it was about a little boy, and they stayed in the hotel. And then because that little boy and that family stayed in that hotel room for so long, that he was confined into the hotel room, that he started to get ill and sick physically, that he started having mobility issues. He started to have trouble with his legs, and that he was not as mobile, and he became sick. And that story really affected me because I could not imagine, having my grandchildren being confined to a hotel for months, for years, and so on. The other thing that I was aware of, that there was a lot of deaths. There was a lot of elders that passed away, but there was also a lot of suicides. There was a lot of things that occurred at that time, and I was aware. Because they were removed from their home, from a place of where their ancestors have laid for thousands of years. And it really broke my heart, and it really affected me. At that time, again, going back to the flood, of how it affected the land. My father was he farmed, and I grew up on a farm. And he was into agriculture, and he raised cattle. But he lost a lot of land at that time. And I felt sorry for him because of all his hard work over the years was depleting. The land was depleting. And I didn't know at that time if his livestock were going to be affected, if things were going to drown. But, I am thankful at that time that we were really fortunate that we had a construction company at our community at that time, and they started to build dikes. If it had not been for those dikes, our whole community would have been underwater. I would have lost my home. But there's also been a lot of damage that has been done to the trees, to the maple trees that have been there since the earth was created. And those trees are still laying there. When I think about the land and what man has done and how he has created the floods that has affected a lot of the communities within the Interlake region. These were man-made floods. At that time, I had heard that they were going to divert the water and that they were going to open up the waterway so that it could move. And I got really worried at that time because I didn't know if I was going to have a home. And at that time I had heard, to protect Winnipeg, the city of Winnipeg, is why they were going to release those waters. That's what I remember at that time. And, I remember when that flood came, that we had all of a sudden the snake population increased. And I'm so terrified of snakes. And I was talking to this lady the other day from my community of how it affected their home. And she had balls of snake in her home because those snakes came, because the water brought those snakes. But what and I'd heard this morning that, that a lot more people should be here that are involved with respect to climate change, to invite Manitoba Hydro, and I think it was Chief Hudson who had mentioned that. And I really agree that, they have to come to these meetings. Because part of it is that, partnerships, that's one of the things that I keep hearing no matter where I go, is that it's about creating partnerships. It's about building relationships with each other, because we have to help each other to be able to sustain a good way of life for our people, for our children, for the ones that are yet to be born. So Manitoba Hydro should be here. I I hunt with my husband, and he's a hunter, and I'm out there a lot, and I love being out on the land. I'm always on the land, and when we work with the young people, we take them out on the land. And, one of the things that, when we have these partners coming in, our non-native brothers and sisters, when we make that invitation, it's so crucial, it's so critical, and it's so important that we invite them to our tables, to our forums. Because one of the things is that I would really, with the message that I would like to share today is that it's about educating, it's about teaching them about the sacredness of the land, of the water, that without that water, there would be no life. But as well, of how the water is becoming so polluted. In our community, we are very lucky that we still have those artesian wells and that I'm able to drink that water, that it's clean. Going back, to when I was a little girl, I remember drinking, out of those pumps, we had to pump those water. I can't remember what they were called, but we would haul water in pails. And I remember very clearly, very vividly, that it was a silver pail that my grandmother used. And that just how good that water tasted, I remember that. It was sweet because it came from underground. But what's happening today is that, our water is being trucked in. We don't have that clean water anymore, and that water has to come from somewhere else. Again, Chief Hudson mentioned, the response and recovery. When we talk about recovery, about how the flood has impacted the families who have lost loved ones due to the flood, there was a lot of grief. There's still a lot of grief because they are still dealing with the grief. And it's so sad. With respect to those waters, again, it was mentioned here this morning, and I think it was Chief Seti who had talked about, those rivers are the waterways. Those are the highways of our people. In our ceremonies, in the water ceremonies, we talk about the lifeblood of Mother Earth. In the same way that, when we have our veins, as you get older, those veins become more visible and you see them. And I always remember when I look at my veins, my lifeblood, I always think about my grandmother. Because those waterways, those rivers, that is the lifeblood of Mother Earth. But what's happening is that they are being severed because of the exploitation that's happening on our lands. So when I talk about inviting our partners, we also have to teach them about the sacredness of water, that they also have to teach their children about the sacredness of the land, because that's our sustainability, that's how we survive. If we destroy the land and the earth, then there won't be anything. What future do my children and my grandchildren, and I have grandchildren, 9 of them, and I have another one on the way. My grandchildren are going to have children. What kind of a future are they going to have? I always wanted to have more children, but my mom told me not to have a lot of children because she said, you have a very difficult journey ahead of you. I also remember, I want to also mentioned that, you know, it was mentioned that about the scientists. Our elders are also scientists. We are scientists. We understand and we know about the land. You know, I remember my dad, he used the sun. He talked about, he knew when it was going to be cold. He knew when cold weather was coming. Because he said, my dad would say to me, do you see the sun? It's covering its ears. It's preparing itself because there's cold weather coming. That's what I remember. Those are the things that my dad taught me. He would also know when there was warm weather coming. In the way that the land, because he would see lights across the lake. And he would say, but it's going to warm up. So my dad, I saw him as a scientist, and he knew, he understood, because that's how our ancestors survived. They knew, they had that understanding. The other thing that I want to say is that, you know, with prophecy, we have prophecies that, you know, our elders tell us that there is going to be a cleansing of the earth, and it's coming. So, you know, going back and teaching our children about how to survive, to go back on the land, to fish, how to harvest food, to prepare gardens, have gardens, so they learn how to fish, to dress down that animal, to respect the animal. We have to go back, and this is what our partners, our white brothers and sisters, have to understand, that we are all in this together, and that, you know, there is a cleansing that is going to take place because of the climate change. That white snow that you see on the land, it's covering, it's a blanket of Mother Earth. That's her blanket, and she's resting, getting ready again to bring that new life to us in the spring when those waterways start to break again. As women, when we give birth, and when those waters break, there is no way of stopping those waters. When they are ready, when that life is ready to come, when that water is ready to come, it's going to come. So we really need to start thinking about and taking our children out on the land, teaching them about where they come from, their identity, about their ceremonies, about their way of life, because that is how we survived. We survived because our ancestors never gave up, and they knew what was coming, because my grandmother said, before she passed away, my great-grandmother, and my dad shared this with me before he passed away, ang gomesen, apache, anisaga ako gemikana, apache wisan nagat, chung bigyausan. If I can translate that, be very cautious. The road that you are going to be traveling on is covered with thorns and thistles. You have a very difficult journey ahead of you. So we have to really think about the ones, the little ones that are there, that are coming up. I've been at the Jordan's Principal Conference over the last couple of days, and some of the work that I see that the case managers and the communities are doing is absolutely awesome, because they are taking the children out on the land. They're teaching them how to hunt, how to fish, how to go snaring rabbits. You know, we try and do that. My husband does that. He just took out my little grandson, our little 4-year-old grandson. They went and set snares, and they brought rabbits, and my grandson was so proud when he brought in the rabbit. So with that, I want to say miigwech for honoring me and allowing me again to be standing here and to share from my heart of how I see and how I've been taught. Miigwech.
Thank you, Mary, for your words and your wisdom and being able to hear that here today. So at this time, I would like to, we'll have a quick health break. So there's muffins in the back, coffee, and we'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll continue on with our agenda. So let's reconvene about 5 after 11. So please help yourself to coffee and water. I think there's juice back there as well, and muffins, and then we will reconvene in 15 minutes.
So, I might have to unplug one of these USBs. Oh, actually, maybe I can use this one.
That's the mouse, right?
Mouse. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. If you guys notice, it is 5 after 11, but we're still having a bit of difficulty setting up the PowerPoint, so just bear with us for a few more minutes. We're trying to get the PowerPoint going, and then we'll continue on with the agenda.
In our language, Onjasea means very simply that, the earth is going to go In our language, Onjasea Kim means very simply that, the earth is going to go through a change, that she is going to bring balance again back into this world. We've created such an imbalance in our world, which is creating climate change. Climate change is really a reflection of our values that we're finding in today's world.
Indigenous knowledge to the forefront with 24 leaders from around the world.
Led by Indigenous protocols of sharing knowledge. The discussion centered on 4 major themes: ancestral knowledge, sovereignty, relationships, and transformation, and culminated with an ancient ceremony to acknowledge
All right, everyone. So sorry for the delay, but we are going to get started here. We do want to provide enough time for our presenters to talk about the issues that they're here to talk about, and of course, we have lunch at noon. So without further ado, I would like to please call up Laura Cameron and Rosalie Labaloy on behalf of Prairie Climate Center, and they are going to be showing a presentation regarding Prairie Climate Center. So it's also, I was just noticing that the presentation on the TVs isn't centered properly, so we'll try sort that out, but we will continue. We do have it up here on the PowerPoint, so if you can't see it, maybe we'll position ourselves accordingly, and then while they're doing their presentation, we'll try to get it centered on the TVs above. So yeah, we'll get started. Laura, please welcome Laura and Rosalie.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here and for your patience while we try to navigate this technology. And thank you to Mary for the beautiful water ceremony and for your words that you shared this morning. That really brought us into this day in a wonderful way, and to all of the chiefs and other representatives that spoke before us this morning. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Laura Cameron. I work as a researcher at the Prairie Climate Center, which is a research center at the University of Winnipeg. And I'm here with Rosalie. She'll introduce herself.
Gwe medalok diok injak mistelisi webek mistibia chakdale wiopik anchik. Geskok edawakta mayok melgi ginoriok chatandelian kirasultik. Nige wigi treaty and territory ukchadelagoka Turtle Lodge. Hello, my relatives. My name is Rosie Labilwa, and I'm from Ilverbar First Nation, New Brunswick. I'm a Mi'kmaq from District 7 territory, and you know, I shared in my language that I'm very happy to be here with each and every one of you, and you know, in our introduction, to help us reconvene, I'll be sharing a song in my language, and I also had said that I'm here working in Treaty 1 territory in Sageen at the Turtle Lodge as a youth intern, and today I'm here on behalf of the Turtle Lodge. This song that I'll be sharing today is, you know, and it's a highly requested song all the time, and it's very powerful, and it comes from back home. When they talk about this man had went on a fast, and this is something that he was given, and it talks about, you know, we live right on the ocean, and so it's talking about that whale is coming ashore and the turtles following behind, and that they're going to bring a message to the Mi'kmaq people when these hard times are coming. So.
Janju
So we wanted this morning to share a bit about the work that we do both at the Prairie Climate Center and at the Turtle Lodge, and in collaboration with each other and with other communities, Indigenous communities in the prairies around climate change. And so I know that this word has come up a lot already this morning, and hearing the feedback from last year's forum, it sounds like people are interested to discuss more about the impacts of climate change and the relationship between climate change and flooding. So I'm definitely not a flooding expert, but I can bring a little bit of information about climate change in sort of a broad sense and talk about some of the work that we do at the Prairie Climate Center. So I'm sure that many of you have seen graphs like this showing that our temperature around the world is increasing. And 2017 and 2018 were both in some of the warmest years that we've seen ever recorded since Western records started, that is, in the 1880s. And we're consistently seeing, I think it's 17 of the last 18 years were among the warmest that we've seen in recent history. So the United Nations has an international body that sort of summarizes the state of climate change research in these assessment reports, and that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. And so they've created 5 of these assessment reports which summarize the state of research on climate change. And so it's just to say that for several decades and longer than that, we've seen these changes happening, and we've been able to start predicting the changes that are coming. And a lot of the work that we do at the Prairie Climate Center with Indigenous partners is sort of bringing together, like Elder Dave Kershane likes to say, bringing together prophecy and prediction. So it's bringing together some of this science with Indigenous knowledge. And so the IPCC put out a report just this past fall, a few months ago, that documents the impacts of what 1.5 degrees of warming would look like. And so 1.5 or 2 degrees of warming on average globally is considered by most climatologists to be a tipping point. And if we exceed this amount of warming, there will be feedbacks in climate cycles that will create impacts that are much harder, if not impossible, to prevent. So we're very quickly approaching this dangerous threshold, and right now we're sort of on track for about 4 degrees of warming globally by the end of the century. So this recent report is considered one of the biggest warning signs to date, and it basically says we have about 10 to 12 years to dramatically change our systems to prevent this runaway climate change, they call it. So at the Prairie Climate Center, one of the things that we are trying to do in our work is to make this science, climate science and data, which doesn't really speak to a lot of people, to make it more meaningful to communities and to make it more accessible and understandable, and really tie it to the national and the local scale. How are these changes actually impacting people? And so we've developed this online platform called the Climate Atlas. It's a website, climateatlas.ca, which you can visit. And this is just a screenshot up here which shows a map. So it combines climate data, mapping, and storytelling through video to try to make climate change more meaningful to people in these territories at a local level. So yeah, it's based on 12 global climate models, and it combines 25 different variables on the map with lots of different interviews and map layers. So to take one example, I don't have the live website up here, but just some screenshots. But you can zoom in to your community or your region. Each little box on the screen is a clickable area. And you can click in wherever it is that you're interested about and look at some of that data in a visual way. So I've here clicked on Winnipeg, and the variable that we're looking at is hot days. So days plus 30 and above, really hot days in the summer. And how is that going to change under climate change in the decades to come? And so the climate models predict that from our recent past, which is the baseline, we normally have about 10, 11 plus 30 days in a summer. That's been normal, and in the second half of this century, under sort of the business as usual scenario, we'll be looking at almost 50 plus 30 days in a summer. So we're seeing drastic changes in the weather, in the climate, on the land. As we've already heard from communities this morning, these changes are directly related to flooding in communities and also drought. Things are changing very quickly, and so this is just one example, but you can also at the bottom explore different variables related to cold weather, temperature, precipitation, and growing season, and see how those might change in your community or your region. And then we have also combined this with video, so storytelling through video, because we know that maps and data don't always speak to everyone. So we also have a team of filmmakers that work collaboratively with community members and experts and people on the land, lots of different folks across the country, to document how they're experiencing and being impacted by the changes, and also how they're responding and how they're innovating and how they're leading the way. And so this example was a video that we made with Montana First Nation community members in Alberta, where they tell their story about how they transitioned from being a very heavily oil and gas dependent nation to now having their own community-owned and operated solar energy company. And, whoops. So through this work, we have developed a lot of relationships with people across the country, in particular with Indigenous community partners, because as we've heard this morning, there's so much that knowledge keepers, Indigenous knowledge keepers and elders and community leaders have to share when it comes to climate change. And so our work sort of aims to support communities in sharing their own stories through video. So we've been invited into a lot of communities to create videos with them to help share how they're seeing and experiencing and responding to changes on the landscape. So one of the partners that we work very closely with here in Manitoba is Turtle Lodge and Elder Dave Kershane, and Rosalie will talk a little bit about the work that they are doing on climate change.
Hello again. At first, I'll let you guys know I'm nowhere near an environmentalist or researcher or scientist, and so that's definitely not my background. Just to let you guys know. But I'm here I'm representing on behalf of the Turtle Lodge and the work that we're doing. And I'm fairly new to the lodge. I just came out here in September, as I was called to come work with Dave and the other elders that are there. And I may have not have been there for some of the initiatives, but my time here, I've learned a lot in what we're doing in regards to climate change and what's happening. And I believe as First Nations people, you know, we have a different understanding of the relationship that we have to the land. And, you know, I could only speak on behalf of myself and my experiences, you know, but we're noticing huge changes. And it's no offense to you know, scientists and anything like that, but it's going to be, this is going to be led by ceremony, and it's going to be by our elders. There's no, where our answers are going to be coming from, it's going to stem from ceremony, and we can't forget that. We can never overstep that. And we have to, I was listening to some of Dave's videos, and when he was talking about his, you know, what's happening today is because we've been so disconnected from our spirits, and we're thinking, we've been taught to think with our head and to stop listening to our heart. So we could see it in some of the younger people that we bring to the lodge that, you know, we've hosted a few gatherings, and it's really amazing to see, you know, a little child go from really so sheltered in and shy, and at the end of the 4-day gathering, this child has blossomed into something else. And I believe that we have to provide those opportunities for our young people, for them to learn. And, you know, a part of this, I was invited to go to the PCC's, one of their engagements on this new initiative that we're, you know, that we're doing this together. And I think it's really important that we have that that we understand that we have that responsibility to help our younger people, our little ones, and to provide them with these opportunities so that they could further learn about themselves. And in that, they're going to learn their relationship to the land. They're going to understand who they are as Indigenous people, as a young man and as a young woman, what their roles are, and their duty to protect that land and to do anything to, you know, to keep it protected and sacred. And some of the initiatives that we have done, and I really like to highly stress, is our rites of passage. And we have one of our grandmothers here today too. We have Mary. And, you know, there's a lot of work that's being done in a not so scientific way, but these answers, they're given to us as gifts from the Creator, and we have that responsibility with that knowledge to follow that. So I'm just trying to think of anything else.
Should we show this? Yeah. Great. So one of the initiatives that we've worked closely with the Turtle Lodge and Elder Dave Kershane is the Anjase Key Initiative on climate change. And this one of the events was an international summit on climate change, which brought together 24 knowledge keepers and environmental leaders in a cross-cultural dialogue on what do Indigenous-led solutions and understandings of climate change look like. And so we have a short video here, which summarizes the reason Dave started the initiative and some of the calls to action that came from the participants. Hopefully it works. I might need to hold the microphone to the speaker here.
In our language, Anjase means very simply that, you know, the earth is...
Sorry, why did this happen?
In our language, Anjase means very simply that, you know, the earth is going to go through a change, that she is going to bring balance again back into this world. We've created such an imbalance in our world, which is creating climate change.
Should I just...
Climate change is really a reflection.
Okay, let me see if we can make it work.
In our language, Anjase means very simply that, you know, the earth is going to go through a change, that she is going to bring bring balance again back into this world. We've created such an imbalance in our world, which is creating climate change. Climate change is really a reflection of our values that we're finding in today's world. The THU International Climate Summit brought Indigenous knowledge to the forefront with 24 leaders from around the world, led by Indigenous protocols of sharing knowledge.
The discussion centered on 4
themes: ancestral knowledge, sovereignty, relationships, and transformation, and culminated with an ancient ceremony to acknowledge and re-establish a human alliance with nature. Initiating this summit, I wanted to show the world who we are, what we have, particularly the knowledge that we hold that has taken us thousands and thousands of years to evolve with. As Indigenous peoples, we can make a great contribution in terms of helping all of us as human beings to come to terms with the way that we're behaving. If we're going to effectively deal with the issue of climate change, then there must be a change of heart. As Mother Earth is changing, we have to change. And that's the challenge for all of us.
Sorry about the technical difficulties. I don't know, I hope people could hear that okay. We just felt it was really important to bring Dave Kershane's voice here, and that's sort of the reason behind making these videos, is so that you can hear the stories from people's own perspectives, especially from elders and knowledge keepers, because not everyone gets those opportunities firsthand. So the idea of the video is to share a little piece of what happens in the lodge. And we've done this sort of work with communities across the prairies. So these are some of the videos that we've made in partnership with communities about their initiatives on climate change, whether it be renewable energy projects or land-based education, as Mary was talking about, culture camps, grassroots organizing, and other initiatives. And so one of the things we're working on now is working with some of these partners to figure out how we can bring these stories together in a common place and a common conversation in a way that respects all of the different ways of knowing and knowledge systems and initiatives and stories across the country, and in a way that sort of re-stories, that changes the narrative on climate change from being something that's so sort of technical within a Western context to really bringing forward Indigenous understandings of climate change. And so Rosalie has been involved in this project on the Indigenous Leadership Group, which is governing the project. And do you want to say some words about that, about your role?
So when did we meet? So in November, I was kind of there accidentally on purpose. Dave had to leave at that time, and so he had asked me to stay in his place, and I ended up becoming a part of the group there. You know, but from the discussions that we had, you know, at times we were, you know, torn in different ways, and you know, but when we shook all those things out and we understood that, it's something that's so much greater, and that is going to, and as I said before, it's something that will be stemmed in ceremony. And we actually had brought, on our second day, went to the Turtle Lodge, and you could just feel the shift in the energy, and just things were just smoothing along pretty well. But something that we had discussed was this is going to be something that's Indigenous led, and it's going to be totally done by our people with the help and alongside with the support of the PCC. And we've seen this in a greater view, that it's not just strictly about the Atlas, that there's something that our people have to, and Dave has said this before, and it was in no way meant to scare anybody or to create fear, but what he had talked about was that tipping point, we may have passed that, and we don't know if we could go back on it. But what I had seen out of that was that we have to encourage our people to come back home into our ceremonies and to learn the ways of our ancestors and those survival ways that had sustained them for since time immemorial. We have to go back and to really embrace that, because that's where everything that we have is right there in front of us. We just have to wake up and to look at it, and to be able to, accept our gifts once again, and that they're really just waiting for us. Especially for our young people, our elders, they're waiting, for us to come home. They want people to teach, and right now we're struggling in the ways of, where do we belong? And I really believe and I understand that. Where I come from, I know who I am, and I wouldn't be this person I am today if it wasn't for my elders and my family. So I don't know. I'll just kind of wrap up with what I have to say. And, I'm very honored to be here and to present in front of you guys. And, I hope that our paths will cross again. So, Walaliok, Miigwechak, hi hi.
Thank you, Laura, and of course, thank you, Rosalie, for the song you shared with us and the knowledge you guys brought to us. So if you take a look at our agenda, we had Ruth Eden up next, but we're going to actually, at this time, call up Cam Blight, the Vice President for the Association of Manitoba Municipalities, to come speak to the forum, as he has to get to a meeting he has a meeting he has to attend, so we want to be mindful of that, and we'll have a quick question period after his presentation.
Good morning, everyone. As I've been made aware that I'm the only thing that's standing between you and lunch, so make sure I'll be very quick. My name is Cam Blight. I am one of the two vice presidents of the Association of Manitoba Municipalities. I'm also the Reeve of the RM of Portage Prairie, and I have been since 2010. The Association of Manitoba Municipalities, or AMM, represents the interests and concerns of all 137 municipalities in the province of Manitoba, including the city of Winnipeg. As water management affects all municipalities, AMM members overwhelmingly support improvements to water management and water quality in Manitoba's lakes and waterways. That is why AMM has been calling for a comprehensive provincial water management strategy to be developed in consultation with municipalities, conservation districts, and other affected key stakeholders such as First Nation communities. Municipalities are responsible, or the local drainage authority in their areas, and each municipality looks at it and does it in a different manner. In some areas, drainage is not a very key focus for them. They have flat lands or there's no ditches, etc. It's just not a huge concern, and sometimes it's the council's direction that it's not a huge priority. Other areas, drainage is very critical, especially to the agricultural production. So there's a lot more focus put on drainage in municipalities. The municipal drainage infrastructure was not originally designed to handle the large rain events that we've recently received, coupled with the extensive drainage that a lot of agricultural producers have done. What is happening now is the water is leaving the land a lot faster and is getting into the municipal ditches and is not able to get away as we need it to, and it's impacting other agricultural producers further downstream and homeowners alike. One of the challenges that we're also faced with is that the provincial drainage network has not been kept up to the same standards as a lot of the ag producers and also municipalities. So we're constantly urging the provincial government to invest in that, to clean out their waterways a little bit, to allow the water to flow freely, as a lot of the water or those waterways are now silted in. They have a lot of growth in place, whether it be cattails, trees, etc. So that's something that we're lobbying the provincial government to do. One of the main concerns with municipalities in the springtime is to get the water moving as quickly as possible and constantly. We want to get our spring melt away so that when any waters from the west or any big rainfall events may happen, that we're prepared to handle that additional water and that people can get on with whatever means they may need to, such as agriculture production, etc. Farmers nowadays want to get on the land as soon as they can, and there's large economic risk to having water lay there longer than necessary. When we talk about flood preparedness, every municipality looks at it a little bit differently. Not all municipalities are at real risk of flooding at spring or summertime. You look at a city like the city of Brandon. They've done some extensive proactive work on the diking system along the Assiniboia River to protect homes and commercial properties in the Corral Centre type area, whereas other municipalities will just take a reactionary method if necessary, and they have some sandbags on hand, or they all have some aqua dams or tiger tubes. The primary focus for flood preparedness for municipalities is to protect the private property, like the homes, not commercial industries. That comes second, that's secondary, and ag land is way down the list. So it's primarily to protect people and their homes. Effective water management and watershed programming demand financial support and incentives from the province of Manitoba so that any new processes can be properly implemented and fully observed in practice. That kind of helps me segue into the new direction that the province is going, where they're focusing more on watershed management. So they have the conservation districts, but they're changing that into more of a watershed style, and that terminology should be changing here shortly. Watershed districts are going to be made up of a lot of municipalities and key stakeholders, and they're going to be operated by a general manager and executive director under the guidance of the board. A lot of decisions that are made in that are not to overrule what municipalities are doing with their own drainage works, but it is to work in collaboration with them along with other municipalities that are in the same area as we try and practice the old adage of no adverse effects on your neighbors. The unfortunate problem with watersheds districts and conservation districts of the past is that they were not funded properly. The funding that the provincial government was providing to these was very minimal, and so what these conservation districts or watersheds can actually perform and do is very minimal, and it's not very effective. So like many First Nations, municipalities cannot absorb the burden of upgrading their flood damage infrastructure on their own. Instead of investing in temporary solutions, all levels of government need to work towards permanent solutions. And so with municipalities, which is what I'll speak specifically to, after a major disaster event, so we'll use the flood of 2011, which I know many were impacted by in this room, any of the damage that took place to roads, infrastructure, bridges, culverts, etc., disaster financial assistance we could apply for, and if we were approved, we'd get funding to replace that infrastructure as it originally was. And with a little extra funding or a little design change, that infrastructure could be a lot more beneficial to handle these weather events and maybe provide more flood protection going forward. However, the Disaster Financial Assistance Program will not fund that. You have to replace it to what it was, which we don't feel is good strategic investment or good, good value for our money. Any extras that are being done is on the municipalities to front, which in some cases is okay, but if you are looking at doing a redesign or just a slight adjustment to what is there, you cannot receive the funding. So unfortunately, I think we need to take a look at that and make some changes there. I was a member of the 2011 Flood Task Force Review Committee, and I had the opportunity to tour a lot of the flood-impacted communities in the province of Manitoba and many different First Nations communities. And what I saw really opened up my eyes and, well, it literally took my breath away. It was quite something. And our municipality was impacted, but nothing like what I saw when I toured a lot of First Nation communities. And one problem that we noticed was that there seems to be a lot of jurisdictional confusion. Whose responsibility is it? Is it the federal government or is it the provincial government? And a lot of times we suggested that the provincial government should have been in doing certain things, but the province would then say, well, no, that's federal jurisdiction. So then we talked to the federal government, they said, well, no, the province is going to handle that. So we see a lot of buck passing, and at times when we cannot afford to have that buck being passed or any time being wasted, as there's a lot of lives and industries being affected. So that's one issue that we really need to improve upon. And as we all know, water knows no political boundaries. So in time of need like that, I think a lot of things just need to be set aside. And who really cares whose responsibility is it? Let's just pick up the phone and talk, and let's see how we can help. And I really hope that is something that we can fix going forward. What I noticed, there was two main concerns in my tours, and even with our own municipality, and that is planning needs to improve, and that is for development, commercial, homes, residential, etc., and also communication. I notice a lot of municipalities and also in First Nation communities, there's a lot of homes being built or businesses located in certain areas that are definite flood-prone areas. It doesn't take much for the water levels to get higher, and there's going to be some negative impacts on these properties. I saw it in St. Laurent, I saw it in Delta Beach, where there's homes or cottages being built right along the shoreline, right on the beach, basically. So any increase in lake levels and a wind from the wrong direction is going to create catastrophic damage. Same with in Brandon, the Corral Center being built where it was. It just wasn't quite thought out properly. And I think going forward, some proper planning measures need to be put in place, such as restricted development in certain areas or certain parameters around that development, such as elevations as to the height of the buildings, no basements, etc., to make sure that these properties are not going to be adversely affected going forward. Another thing is communication and partnership. And clear communication protocols need to be in place not only in times of emergencies. Once again, the principle of no adverse effect to neighbors needs to come into play. Any works that we're doing should not negatively impact someone else downstream. And that's something that we're really trying to work hard towards in communicating with our fellow municipalities, but also with First Nation communities. I toured with one First Nation community in particular, and I had some excellent conversations with the chief, and I offered up some suggestions of what we're doing in our municipality that could maybe assist and aid and help prevent some reoccurring situations. And we actually had it set up that I was going to come back with some of the individuals from my municipality and share some information and see if we can help in any way. And unfortunately, that chief was not elected back in, so that I didn't get that opportunity. However, having said that, I never did pick up the phone and contact the new chief and offer that same courtesy to that individual. So it goes both ways. That's something that we got to learn. Someone's just got to take the initiative and pick up the phone and make the call, and let's work together. So having said all that, ultimately we need to open up the lines of communications and work collaboratively together. As I said, water knows no political boundaries, and we're definitely stronger together. And so I really hope that there's an opportunity for the municipalities to work together with First Nation communities so that we can improve on our flood preparedness and make sure everyone's in the loop as to exactly what's happening, what each other is doing, and once again, we can be stronger together. So thank you very much for your time. Sure.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation. Unfortunately for time, we are only able to open up the floor for about 5 minutes for question period, but I do want to mention that all the contact information for the presenters over the next few days are found in your package. So if you have any further questions, you can see that. So we will open up the floor now for any questions.
Everybody's hungry.
Oh.
Are you, my name's Irwin, are you still working with the Southern Chiefs on the partnership between Southern First Nations and municipalities on improving things like you say, planning and communications?
I'm going to have to call upon my counterpart Nick over here to advise me on that, as I was just newly elected in November. So I want to say yes, but I better get the actual answer here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Kravets. I'm the Senior Policy and Communications Analyst for the AMM. In regards to your question, there was a formal agreement signed. However, it did expire. However, though, the AMM is in constant communication with our colleagues, TLEC, TRCM, and so forth. So if you have any questions, concerns with the process, or any sort of additional resources that could be created that perhaps resulted from our partnership, we're certainly happy to discuss those. And many of those documents can be found on our website currently if you want to review those further.
Thanks, Nick.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I might as well ask Nick. You know, the like environment for gasoline, they'll charge an extra penny on gas or whatever for users, you know, vehicles on the road, trucks, whatever, semis, and industry. Why don't they, because of the First Nations that have been affected, you know, especially interlake bands, you know, users of, you know, the farmers, manufacturers, why don't they, you know, come up with some sort of thing where they do the same kind of thing, because you're severely impacting interlake bands, for example, displacing them like Lake St. Martin. Why don't you come up with some sort of environmental fee for commercial users, industry, farmers like that too?
I'm going to suggest that now here's where it comes down to the jurisdictional type situation. You know, who does that sort of work? Is that a provincial responsibility? Is that a federal responsibility? Or is it all three of us? Or four of us, pardon me. Federal, provincial, First Nation communities, and AMM sitting around the table and having a discussion. We're always open to sit down and talk about what we can do to assist communities and First Nations at large as well. So I can't answer that question. That is not something that necessarily AMM develops. We don't develop that type of policy, or that is more of a provincial issue or venture, I guess. Sorry.
Okay, we'll take 2 questions, and then we'll have to close up the question period.
Okay, I'm not sure if you can answer this, but just in related to what you brought up about where homes are being built. So I guess this might be actually a question maybe for some of our people from ISK here, but in regards to my own community, Pine Creek First Nation, I'm Chief Karen Batson. So I was just wondering about funding to do geotechnical surveys in the community to look at where's an appropriate place for us to be building new homes. We've had a hydrological study done in 2015. So we know that we have a very high water table in our community. And so, you know, we've brought in 19 new homes in the last couple of years. And so we're running out of spaces that we can build homes where they're not prone to flooding, or they're in areas where, in a few years the home is full of mold because it shouldn't have been built in that or placed in that spot to begin with. So I guess my question to the ISK people is there funding available for us to do a study in our community, or when we're looking at bringing in a number of homes, we want to place them in areas where we're not dealing with mold in a few years, you know, and it's a a safety issue for our families that are living in these homes. And I know in our community there are homes that do have mold because of the area that they were placed in. And again, the other, I guess, to tie into that is we're running out of space in our community. We need more land. We need better land to place our homes on. So maybe someone can answer that. Thank you.
Yeah, unfortunately, that I can't respond to the funding part of that. However, I do know that in our 2011 report, we did say that the federal government needs to provide more resources to First Nations communities to help with planning and doing tests, just as you said, on your land to know where the best and safest place is to put your properties, or how to eliminate some of the high water table issues that you may have, because there might be some I don't know if tile drainage would work or just what. There might be some other alternative solutions that you could look at. Can I add, is there a lot of the community, do they have basements in a lot of the homes? No, okay. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't answer the question on funding, but I do know that that is something that we have brought forward, and it is recommended in the report. Unfortunately, that report was released in 2013, and here we are in 2019. So.
Thank you, Chief Batson. We will finish the question period with Chief Van Sanen.
Good afternoon. Chief Van Sanen from Northlands National Canadian First Nation. I come from an isolated community. It grabbed my attention when you mentioned about the watershed. I'm just going to stand up. When I'm standing, I feel more comfortable talking when I'm standing. Anyhow, my community is an isolated community. And then I know the province of Manitoba has this program, sort of funding that's been talked about right now under to watershed protection. But the inside details I'm not fully aware of, where we want to protect our lands in the north, so as the water and also the lands. But I have tons of questions here before I can make any decisions on behalf of my membership. Right now there's explorations happening within my area. I know a little bit off topic here, but I'm talking, it's all related to the water and the damages it could cause. But then if there's two Dene bands in northern Manitoba. There's Northlands Sayuzi Dene First Nation and Sayuzi Dene First Nation. One of my colleagues from Sayuzi Dene was the one that approached Northlands about this watershed that he's been working on with the province of Manitoba. And then, if ever both communities do agree with this, with it inside the watershed protection, will there be any developments of any explorations or minings or anything like that? Then also, I'd like to know more about funding. You also talk about funding and economic development and First Nation rights, harvesting and so forth, with it inside that. Is this watershed protection, is there a clause on the government side where that we have to fall under the provincial laws under the lands, or what? Or is it tied into provincial parks? So these are the questions that, that I've been thinking about since you brought up the watershed. Masichok.
Thank you. I think those are excellent questions, and I'm going to really disappoint you and say that I don't have any answers for those questions, but I do believe that there's another person that's supposed to be a part of the panel, which I'm kind of going ahead of them, that may be able to answer those questions. I don't want to put words into their mouth, but they are representing the province of Manitoba, and that might be something that they can speak on. I can only represent the municipalities and what the municipalities' direction is and what their challenges are that they're facing. However, it doesn't hurt for us to hear this, to understand and appreciate the challenges and concerns that you have going forward as well, so that we can make sure that's part of our thought processes going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Cam, for your presentation and talking to us on behalf of the Manitoba municipalities. I think just quickly before we break for lunch, we had a representative from ISK that wanted to reply to Chief Batson's comment.
Sure, thank you. I'm Vern from Indigenous Services Canada, Emergency Management. And so Chief Batson had a very good question in regards to that, in regards to, one, they need, you know what, when you are replacing homes and everything like that, you're wanting to put them in the right area to eliminate certain situations of, you know, years and years of flood-prone areas. So when it comes to that kind of survey, absolutely. We can fund that. First Nation Adapt, there's funding with that program that can fund those surveys. Also in regards to, and I know we are working with Pine Creek with their Elders Lodge as well, but we do have a new program, and I'm not sure if everyone knows, but when Indigenous Services Canada, when there is a situation and we are replacing homes, it's a brand new program called Build Back Better. And so if there are situations that the First Nations want to, let's just say, if there are situations where the homes can still be moved to a let's just say a higher ground, we would pay those costs. If there's situations where they need to have a better kind, you know, with replacement homes, a better kind of foundation to eliminate certain flood situations, absolutely. Even some sort of things with, let's just say, better kind of drywall or anything like that to eliminate mold or anything like that, or anything that will, you know, reduce mold situations. That's what that program is for, and I don't think a lot of First Nations know about that. It is for our recovery program where when we do replace homes, but please note that that is available, and whenever our team is working with a community, I will be definitely fighting to have Build Back Better used in those homes, because obviously we want the best homes going in. Chief Batson, I can't help you with land. That's not my department. I'd love to say, hey, here's some more land. Go for it. But that's not my area, and I can't speak to that. But I can definitely have the folks in our lands area talk to you and said, come on, they need some more homes. Let's make it work. So we're here to help, and we're here to work with First Nations. So please don't be shy and come and talk to us if there's ever something that you want to know or questions answered on our part. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Here, I'll give you the mic. Here.
The question I do have is about the program you just introduced, the Build Better thing there. Is that like proposal driven from the community, or is that we use our capital dollars and get reimbursed?
So it's a little bit different. When we do a recovery project, let's just say for an example, we're using it with ebb and flow. So there were some homes that we're replacing in regards to the 2014 flood. We're looking to do some situations of using Build Back Better in that case. In let's just say in Pine Creek, where we're doing some work in the Elders Lodge, that's where we're going to do it. It has to be something to do with an actual event that happened. So there's some sort of obviously damage or replacement of homes or whatever the case is when that would apply. So it's not like just a First Nation just applying to use Build Back Better to just fix their homes or whatever the case may be. It would be if there's actually something, an event, and we're working to replace homes or repair homes or anything like that. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Yeah? Okay.
All right, so that'll be it for the question period. Thank you. I hate to cut anyone off, but we will be having a panel right after lunch as well. So again, I would like to thank Cam Blight for his presentation on behalf of the Manitoba municipalities, and also to Mike Gagne, who's here on behalf of Ruth Eden, that graciously allowed Cam to go before him, and we'll be hearing from him still after lunch. So I would like to, at this time, ask Mary Meitoyajing to come up and bless the food so that we can enjoy our lunch. So.
Maybe I can. Sorry, they're just grabbing the food. Jenna, it's okay. I could just go ahead and say our prayer for the food. Oh, sorry, okay, it's coming. Thank you so much. No, I'm good. Okay. Bushu, me watch me no gum ticket. Where we kungan, we sanin, menodship mimenodish gawang, chip mimenos gawang, Kitchena nakoma, hawe, Kishamanatu, Kanagagu gagi baget nangama, chip mion chip madas young, chip mion dacho wang, Kini Johnsananek, Conjek Usananek, Kitchena nakudam, me watch the ket, keep me baget nangwa. I give thanks for this. For this food that we are about to enjoy, we are about to eat. I give thanks to the Creator for providing everything for us that we need in order for us to sustain our lives and to nourish our mind, body, and spirit. And I give thanks for the many blessings of the food, the animals that give of themselves every day, for Mother Earth providing as she grows that food so that our children and grandchildren can enjoy. With that, I say miigwech chinanakondam. So then, we could put that in, do you have a container? I can take it, and I'll put it on the lamp tonight. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
If I could just ask if the elders could go first, and then the rest can follow. And it's on